If you're not hitting your goals, I think you have to look at your goals. If your goals are purely industry centric, you have to look deeper into those goals and say, well, what would that give me if I achieved it? And now how can I make it something I can do in this new market?
What's going on, everybody? My name is Hassiem Mohammed, and you are listening to The Actor's Instrument, where we discuss the qualities you need to succeed in the entertainment industry. And if you'd like to help us succeed in continuing to bring you exciting guests onto the show, then please hit that subscribe button. It really helps out a ton. According to most statistics, around 30% of Americans make New Year's resolutions each year, but less than 10% successfully keep them, with a significant portion giving up within the first week or month of the new year. To help us understand how to effectively set goals as artists in an industry where so much is out of our control, I'm joined today by artist consultants Joshua Morgan and Mike Labbadia of Artists Strategy. Since its inception, Artist Strategy has worked with actors all over the world, helping them to develop structure in what is a structureless industry. It is a company that helps artists to see themselves as entrepreneurs and their careers as business entities. They've helped clients to land agents, raise over $70,000 to produce and shoot a pilot. They've had clients book Broadway national tours. And this past year, they had someone book a series regular role on television. They are making a difference in artists' lives. They made a difference in my life. Full disclaimer, I used to be an Artist Strategy client, and I now work with them as a consultant as well. Mike and Joshua, thank you for joining me.
Thank
I know. I mean, Hassiem.
you. It's good to be here. Thanks for that awesome introduction. I like your podcast. It's so professional. You really have it together. I'm feeling somewhat shame and guilt in this moment, but good. Yeah, that was really hot.
So Joshua and Mike also have their own podcast called Creative Risk. We'll plug that here now, so you can check that out if you're interested. We'll just say it's a different vibe from this show, but it's great nonetheless, and I do highly recommend you should check it out. All right, guys, I like to dive right in. Why are New Year's resolutions almost a guarantee to fail? Like 90% of the population does not have New Year's goals that become successful or attained.
And I'm jumping right to artists. Why artists in particular struggle to even meet their own goals. Because it's easy to sort of set a dream, right? And be like, I'm going to do this thing. What's harder is to have the discipline to build the habit to allow you to meet whatever that goal resolution might be. I mean, we talk about this all the time, like with artists in particular. They're rarely of a shortage of dreams. It's usually their ability to follow through because of whatever it might be, lack of structure, that sort of gets in the way. And I would posit that that's probably what fucks up most resolutions.
Yeah, I think that another interesting point to this is that um especially like in our industry, we're in very reactionary mode all the time, right? So it's like um I'll even speak to myself. I remember last year I was like, you know, I remember very distinctly, I was like, I really want to focus on X, Y, and Z things this year. And last year I literally worked all year except for like 2 months. But I did not live up to my New Year's resolution. And I say this because I think that it's hard to have the drive and the independence to be on your own journey and to like especially as actors, which, we all three of us are, because you're just like, oh, when you book, it's like everything drops for that. Or when this starts happening, or you need, everything drops for that. And so like to really commit to your own independent journey without external validation is very challenging because we're in a feedback cycle of approval from the outside, I feel like. I mean, that's my experience at least, because I have some pretty strong New Year's resolutions this year, and they are very much within my control. But, if I if it's another busy year of booking, it's like, will I actually do that stuff that I actually think is more important than that? So blah blah blah.
Sure. So,
Yeah.
yeah, what I'm hearing is people lack the system, sort of the methodology in order to achieve they just set as Joshua said, the dream, but don't really have a method to getting there. Before we dive into that method, because I do think it's super important, I just want to hit you know, the kind of elephant in the room of why is it important for artists to set goals? I mean, so much of
Mm.
what we do is not even within our control. What does it matter if I set a goal to book a role on Broadway or not? It's not up to me. I'm not the one who casts me.
Yeah, I think that Josh always talks about this, and I do think it's true because it's about direction, right? So I think that the challenge is how do you have really strong goals and very clear and specific goals, but then you also have to remove because I think you make a great point. You know, so much is outside of your control, and more people, this idea just from people who I really respect. People are kind of saying you have to be open. You have to sort of be open to what comes and not everything. I do, somebody who tries to be more spiritual and also consider these things like, you know, life isn't a science, right? So there is an element of faith and there is an element of being open to what comes. However, setting really clear, specific goals does a couple things. Number one, it clarifies your values. So if you're saying just in general, I want to do theater, right? Or I want to do more of this, but then you have to come up with as Hassiem, you really emphasize a specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time sensitive goal, and you have to look at it like and see it. I think there's a the conversation that happens within you that goes like, "Well, is that what I want?" Like, "Is that actually what I want my life to look like?" We have all these ideas floating in our head, but when we set them down on paper and look at them, the image of them, I think it clarifies our values, number 1. Number 2, I do believe that, like, getting clear about goals and putting them on paper and looking at them, I do believe in sort of, cognitive bias or whatever that, like, you're going to start to do things if you're looking at your goals every single week, even every single day, you're gonna start to see opportunities and ends that you were not seeing before, right? Because that goal is front and center. And the other thing is that it gives you ideas, right? So that this is the final point, and then I don't know if Josh wants to comment on it, but, like, if you do come up with a really clear and specific goal, like, I want if I'm just saying, like, I wanna do theater, okay. But if you were to say, like, I want to book, you know, an I wanna be a part of an original work that goes to Broadway in the next 5 years, and I start to break that down backwards, and I start to do research on shows that have done that. Oh, maybe this means booking a show that is like, maybe either commercial off Broadway or maybe it's something at like New York Theater Workshop or something like that can transfer. Okay, so in 3 years, I wanna be in, like, a very buzzy off-Broadway show, either commercially or in New York Theater Workshop, something like that. Then when you set that really clear and specific goal, you can work backwards because now you have framework to go, "Oh, well, who's the casting person in your theater workshop? Who are writers who work there often? Who are commercial off-Broadway producers working all the time? Maybe I can produce this thing. Who are financiers in this space?" So when you get really specific, it'll actually give you more ideas than just sort of keeping it too broad, right? Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does, and I love what you said. You brought up direction, and I heard a video the other day. There's a word for that thing whenever you, like, set a goal or say you're like, "Oh, I wanna buy a Fiat 500," and all of a sudden you start seeing Fiat 500s
Right. I think
everywhere.
it's called not cognitive bias, but something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Cognitive
Yeah,
something.
it's something like that, folks.
Yeah.
And so similarly, if you set a goal, like you said, to be in a specific production or a specific theater or work with a specific person, all of a sudden, just because you set that goal and wrote it down, you are more likely to begin seeing those opportunities all around you. Um, Joshua, could you take us through the process of, let's say, I'm coming to Artist Strategy for help and I want to be a series regular on TV. Like that's my biggest dream as an actor. Could you take me through a process, maybe an abbreviated process of what setting that goal would look like or how to make sure that like I have a chance to make this thing happen?
Obviously, becoming a series regular, there's no A, B, C, D, E, F, G. If there were, there'd be a lot more series regulars and a lot more employed actors and happy people. So it's there is an art to it. But then when you start with something like that, Hassiem, essentially the macro question you have to ask yourself is, well, what is that going to take? What does that mean, and what does that even have to take? So let me give you a super specific example, because you could go into relationships, you could go into, from what Mike was saying about targeting casting, but let's just actually take experience, because a lot of actors will say, "Oh, I want to be a series regular," but they've never been on television, and they've done very little television. They've done very little screen work at all. So an example of taking that goal and how you might break it down into steps that might bring you closer to it is to simply go, well, let me get used to my relationship with the camera by way of self-producing something, actually. And I'm going to even use that self-produced project, by the way, to build some inroads into the television industry. So I might go, okay, 5 years, I want to be a series regular. And we work macro to micro and breaking down goals. So I might say, okay, so 3 years, I've booked a few TV things, if I've done no TV whatsoever. And in a year, I'm simply getting in the room. Okay, so we just have those long-term goals. But then the next year, getting back to the experience piece, might go, okay, so over the course of the next year, I'm going to produce 3 short films. And I'm gonna do that, and in doing that, I'm gonna give myself the experience of being on camera, learning my pros and cons, watching myself, asking people for feedback along the way. And again, as an offshoot to bring us closer to the TV piece, maybe I go and I'm gonna look at some associates that are working on television, casting associates or assistants that are working on shows that I'm interested in being on, and maybe I'll ask them to come in to my 3rd one. Once I've got my, a little more experience even as a producer, so that I know what I'm doing, I'm gonna offer them $750 to help me cast 2 of the leads. So I'm gaining my experience, and I'm potentially building some relationships. And just to circle back, because again, it's a big question. Simply going, "I wanna be a series regular. What is that even going to potentially take?" And then, allowing the work to stem from that.
I really love that example because you took a huge lofty goal. Like many actors listening to the show, if they had one series regular contract in their entire careers, they'd be relatively satisfied, right? And feel like they relatively accomplished something. But you just broke that down to the point where you took this huge lofty goal to like produce a short film. Or even maybe before, like, the short film becomes a thing, like, connect with a casting associate. Like, we can all do that. Like, you can find their emails online or you can hit them up on Instagram, and I've connected with a lot of casting professionals that way, particularly associates, who are a little easier to get in contact with. So I really love that process. Now, what do you guys say to artists who are listening to this and they're like, this is really, like,
One of the
right brain"
brains.
is it right brain is the less creative side of the brain? Yeah, whatever. Y'all know what
Whatever.
y'all know what point I'm trying to make.
That brain.
There's a side of the brain that's a little more analytical, a little more logical. There's one that's a little more creative and artistic. What do you say to the folks who are listening to this and they're like, "Listen, my brain does not do there's a reason why I'm an artist." Right? All this goal setting, that doesn't work for me.
We were talking to, I was talking to Tom Pasinka yesterday, for our podcast, who he was nominated for the Tony for Stereophonic, and, this dude's a fucking act like, I would say he's like an artist, like a Wooby art he's like an actor's actor. He was saying, like, I had a realization a couple years ago, like, it is ridiculous that every other industry, area in in life, if you're trying to make money from it, requires some sort of strategy. Whether it's, sales, whether it's, you start a plumbing business, you open a restaurant, anything that a service you're offering where you're trying to make money, you have to start to think about strategy, whether it's networking, whether it's marketing, brand building, all of these things, your finances, income streams. Why would we be removed from that? So just kind of theoretically, we are operating within a system where we are trying to make money offering something that lots of other people are offering.
Yeah, and it's frustrating because many of us didn't become artists necessarily to make money. It's more like we have to live and survive in a capitalist society.
That's a great point, and so, you know, I but everybody does it, it's just the reality we're in, and I'm gonna say one more thing about this, and I don't know if Joshua totally agrees with this, but, I think that we are on the precipice of something very different. Arts is changing. The arts landscape is changing immensely. I actually think that all artists are entrepreneurs, and all entrepreneurs are artists. You look at people who are starting even drop shipping companies, or think about them, or or they're coders and they wanna work for themselves. What do they have to do? They have to make shit. They have to put creative output, they have to grow a personal brand, they have to, like, make art now. They have to make art and move people, and I think that what the future of art is that these things are actually gonna become more enmeshed, they're gonna become the same thing. There is not much if I'm selling T-shirts or I'm, like, a musician, frankly, there's not much of a difference between the 2 anymore. The product is different, but the whole essence of what one has to do is basically the same. You know, growing a personal brand, you know, growing an owned audience so that you have power, right? It's like it's the same. So business and art are actually not going to be separate. They're going to become more immersed, and actually specialization is ending. So there's not just actors, writers, all of these things are becoming one thing now. So I think that if you are like, I only do this and that's my only thing I do. And listen, if you work all the time and it works for you, make a living, fantastic. But I think that if you're struggling, like, this is, whether we like it or not, this is the future we're moving into. Like, the artist is not what it was. I don't know if that makes any sense.
It does, and I think that what you guys are bringing up, which is a great point for us to take in, is that it's time for us to get with the program. There's I've talked to a lot of artists and actors who are trying to hang on to a vestige of what this industry used to be. You used to just be able to be a good actor and show up in a casting office, and if you were maybe the best person plus good looking, you could begin to have a career, and I think that what you're saying, you just mentioned personal brand, like, this is all new things that we're gonna have to consider.
Yeah, well, institutions are weak. And so, right? So, like, even though, like, we feel like we're at the bottom of the totem pole and a casting director in Hollywood, it feels like such a big thing to us. Like, these things are losing relevance in culture, and these institutions are actually struggling and they're very weak. So, when institutions are weak, lateral thinking is what wins, right? If you just kind of believe the path of, like, actors do this, this is what actors do. Like, that doesn't work when the system by which that linear thinking works is weak and falling and actually hurting. So, you have to think more creatively and expansively.
Let me also say this. I was talking to someone we work with yesterday and I really do think of her as a prolific self producer. And one of the things she said was, uh, I have to make my art so badly that when I don't, I have panic attacks. And what it made me think about in relation to this question of why do artists struggle sometimes with engaging with elements of the work that are non-creative, I would argue that their why isn't strong enough, that their point of view isn't strong enough, that the need to make the art isn't strong enough. Because when we want something badly enough, and I'm careful when I say that because some artists might say, "Well, it's not that I don't want it," but when it's inside of us in a way that we have to get it out, I do believe we're willing to bend and step out of our comfort zones. Because, for example, she specifically was giving an example of having to get this project done and subsequently finding herself reading 50 pages of tax code in order to, you know, get the and that really resonated with me. That if you as an artist, if it's inside of you and your point of view is clear enough and you have to get it out, I don't know if you would play the game of like, "But I don't wanna do that other stuff." And I am saying, like, get over it. Like, we all have to anything worth fighting for is exactly that, fighting for it, you know?
It's hard. It's hard. And like you said, the industry's changing. And so, it's better to get over it and get with the program than to complain that it's not what you thought it was. And I mean, if you do feel that strongly that it's not what you thought it was, then, maybe you should try doing something else. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just genuinely saying, like, if it's not what you want it to be, then, like, you don't have to do
Well, it's
this.
because it's not what we signed up for. I mean, I'm sorry to
Yeah.
keep, hitting on a point, but I'm gonna say it again, like, there is in terms of reality, there is no difference between somebody who is a painter trying to sell their paintings now and somebody who offers, like, coding services. Like, there actually is no difference anymore in terms of, yes, the product at the end is different, but there really is not a difference between these things anymore. Like, I wholeheartedly believe this because I'm seeing it just reflected back to me again and again and again. It requires all of the same things.
I wanna go back to something Joshua said about the why not being strong enough. And I have a little insider information because I do work with artist strategy. I know that before we take clients through a goal setting process, like before we even say, like, what are your goals? We do go through a process of what is your why? What is your vision? What are your values? Could you speak to the importance of identifying a why in the again, if we're talking about the process of goal setting, why is it so important to identify the why first? And we can use the example from earlier. I want to be a series regular on television. How can we take a step back from that goal to kind of build this foundation in that developing a purpose for it before we move forward?
We know how hard this business is. In a general sense, most people understand how difficult it is to a point. And I'll just take myself. Um, I I have had a lot of career highs, and every day I get up and I have to fight tooth and nail. Every day is like starting over all over again, even though I've had some big successes. Relevancy, not mini tangent, but we fall in and out of relevancy in this industry all the time. You know, my manager always says, nobody wants you until everybody wants you. And then they might not want you all over again. Why does this relate to the why? Because especially as you get older, and I'm older than the two of you too, um, you know, the you do get perspective. Oh, do I want to start a family? Do I want to own property? Do I want to insure my health insurance? Therefore, in order for us to withstand the inevitably choppy, and I mean for all artists, inevitably choppy moments of feeling completely rejected and demoralized and maybe feeling like a failure in this capitalist society when you're broke for however X, Y, or Z amount of months because you haven't worked, whatever it is. If that why is a pillar for you, if it is rooted in your day to day, then it allows us, in my opinion, to withstand what can be often pretty brutal. So for me, that is the biggest value of a why, to say nothing of the fact that they're using series regular as an example. Why do you want to be a series regular? What comes before even that? Where did that goal come from for you? And by the way, if it's fame and fortune, quote unquote, I actually don't think there's any shame in that game. Meaning, if you're like, I won't say who it is, but there's an actor actually went to our school who's quite famous now, who used to always say to me, "I just wanna be famous. I just wanna be famous." And that led him and look, I'm not here to pass a value judgment on that. He gave himself direction and allowed him to make choices in his career to meet that goal, by the way.
Would you guys be willing to share? I mean, this is a little personal, but would you be willing to share your why behind your career goals so that people can get a sense of like what that looks like tangibly? Because we've been speaking very generally, which I think is valuable, but I also feel like sometimes if it can get a little personal.
I'll be honest with you. I've been working this is a consistent 2 years of working. I just came off this job, and I'm like, "What is going on?" Like, I'm like, "What am I" as the industry even as I'm working all the time, I'm like, "The industry, what's going on? What am I doing in this industry?" So I had to go back to it. I'll read my why. Here we go. There's a creative current running through all of existence. I wake up every day to add to and receive from that creative current without judgment, fear, or ulterior motives. I live my life in such a way to better prime myself to add to that current. I prioritize a process consistent of creative output and fueled by quality input over results. Embracing the journey of creation is more significant than the outcome. I strive to continually develop an ever changing, strong, authentic point of view by being adaptable in my opinions, ensuring openness to new ideas and perspectives while maintaining a lack of judgment towards myself and others.
just listening to what you said, it seems like you really value the creativity above anything else, even outside of the outcome. Like maybe the process is more important to you. Does that mean that you would be satisfied just like doing like plays in your living room for the rest of your career?
Well, it's a good question. Well, that's where it leads to my vision, right? I mean, like, I think that for me, again, a big priority of mine, of plugging into my why, and this has come from, by the way, 12 years in the business, basically, and coaching for an extended period of time, is making things and generating things is number 1. That's number 1, and that's the best business practice you can have, is to make shit. You know, whether it's a YouTube videos, whether it's a readings in somebody's apartment, generating work is the most important. And I know at the end of the day that if I have strategy to sort of, make sure that those projects serve me in ways towards like a sustainable, hopefully monetized career, that will serve me. But what I struggle with is that doggedness of getting up and making every single day, that discipline to make, which is the best strategy you can have. It does everything for you. It helps you build relationships, helps you build a brand, helps you hone your artistic craft. So my why really has to be connected to why get up and make every single day. Well, it can't just be about results. It has to be about something bigger than that because I know that if I make and generate nonstop, I will find success because this is the thing you have to do to find success. And strategy comes with that, of course, but I can't lead with that.
And what I love about what you just said, Mike, is it connects us to an earlier point Joshua made about people lacking systems and process to achieve their goals. What you
Right.
just articulated, and I don't know because you said you have your New Year's resolution. I don't know what it is, but it sounds like the process you just articulated of creating every day, that's so tangible and it's something that's so within our control. And if I could push us forward with the follow-up question, maybe Joshua, if you'd like to answer. Um, I know something I struggle with is setting goals and not achieving them. It gets really frustrating or having goals that like aren't within my control, like booking a Broadway debut, you know? So how do you work with clients to work through that process of like making sure that maybe they have a balance of what's in their control versus what's not? Is that something you consider at all?
There are lots of folks who look at the series regular and they go, "That's my goal." Um, and when they hang their hat on that and they don't meet the shorter term goals of guest star, co-star, and allow that to define their sense of success, they're actually still engaging with what our work is, trying to fight against, which is seeking uh, success or validation from the industry that doesn't want to give it to you. So that's why I took it to the self-producing piece, even when you first asked that question. And so to when you say, well, how do you work on that? Well, you have to have that conversation with folks about trying to give them the perspective to say, do you see what we're focusing on here and how not only disempowering it is, but how likely disappointing it's going to be? It's not that we can't set a goal like that for direction, but to let that be your metric for success is a pretty slippery slope. And so kind of getting to actually what Mike is talking about in terms of this new 2024, 2025 artist is maybe some work that you have to do by yourself in order to come back and say, "Okay, I'm willing to take this head on."
So what I think I'm hearing, if I can synthesize this, is that the act of setting a goal as an artist is less about achieving that big lofty goal and more about all of the things along the way that pursuing that goal will give to you and will add to your life and to your career.
It's like a snowball rolling down a hill. And let me just say one last thing about this, which is not to again feel like I feel like I'm like Mr. I don't know, Dread or something, but it's not. To me, it's actually very exciting. But if you're not hitting your goals, I think you have to look at your goals because the thing is that if your goals are purely industry centric, which is bookings. If bookings are your goals, right? I think you need to sort of pause. Again, in this moment where the house is burning down, well, why do you wanna be on Broadway? Well, let's even okay, I wanna make my Broadway debut, would love to be on Broadway. But why? What would that do for you? Is there another way to do that that is not dependent on just booking a job? Right? Is there another way to do that to achieve the same feeling? Because the industry is changing immensely. So I think that if you're not hitting your goals, I think you have to look to and they're all like industry-based goals that are outside of your control. You can do a lot, but at the end of the day, they are outside of your control. I think you have to look deeper into those goals and say, well, what would that give me if I achieved it? And now how can I make it something I can do in this new market?
Mm. Could
I don't know
could
if that makes sense.
it does. No, it absolutely does. And back to the kind of the first thought you had in your response, choosing goals that aren't booking centric. Could each of you just give one example of a goal that has nothing to do with booking anything? Because it's hard to get away from that. Like
Sure.
that's kind of what our job is, right? Or so we thought.
Well, I think for me, one big macro goal I have is to make art and monetize it. That is something I don't need to do within that has nothing to do with the industry at the end of the day. So like my big macro goal is to make art and make a living from it. That has nothing to do with bookings. And so, for me this means, oh, well, how do I, what am I producing this year? Okay, fuck the festival circuit. If I'm producing shorts this year, fuck the festival circuit. I'm actually going to set a goal. And again, of course, it's outside of my control at the end of the day, but this is much more within my control. I want to do it so I can drop a short and within 3 months get 500,000 views on it on YouTube. Drop it right to YouTube. Okay, so I know that that goal is set. That is nothing to do with industry, and I could star, direct, write this short, whatever. Okay, so what's my 7th month marketing plan? How am I starting to cultivate podcasts, blogs, whatever? How am I starting to, potentially lead with social media content? What's my paid ad strategy? Right? So the world opens up. Who can I maybe cast in this who maybe does have some sort of following that I can, potentially leverage and have them share? So this is an example of a micro goal on my way to being able to build an owned audience and make a living from art. This is a shorter term example of something that again, I think as somebody who works a lot, at the end of the day, it's more relevant. Like I'm not trying to like be like like I love booking jobs and working, but at the end of the day, what's a more valuable skill set? Like being able to make your own shit and reach people with it and make money from it. That's the future. So it's like, it's hard for me not to actually get distracted by jobs. I have 2 jobs lined up this year, and it's hard for me not to almost get distracted by that shit, and instead be like, "What is the actual long-term path towards success?" It's not booking going from job to job to job. That's not the long-term path of success.
Sure. And Joshua, what's a goal? It doesn't have to be yours, but an example of something that is not tied to a booking.
Um, if you are actively going, well, I'm going to seek out a creative cohort of my own, of people that I trust and respect. If nothing else, having that community that I can then work within, potentially collaborate, use as a support system. And Hassiem, I'll just bring it back to the point you made about the direction and then the things that come because of it. Sometimes you set a goal, and we know this is a who you know kind of business. So if nothing else, that's another example, though, of a byproduct of setting a goal and going, well, who do I need to know? Well, I need to know other artists who are working in the area that I'm interested in working in. And it doesn't have to be about getting something. It can simply be about, again, growing a community, a network of like-minded individuals. So that's an example of a focus that can go completely separate from, did I book this or not?
Yeah. No, I love it. And again, both of your examples, something that's within your control, something that can yield crazy good results, and that could ultimately lead to more bookings. Final question for you guys that I have. What is the quality that you possess that sets you apart as an artist entrepreneur?
Like, as an artist or as an artist entrepreneur?
I thought we were saying they're the same thing.
I think they're the same thing. I'll take it, because I think it is because no, because this is starting to really change for, even though I've always believed an artist is an entrepreneur, like I'm starting to realize that like those are literally the same thing in today's world. They are the same thing. And so for me, I think a unique point of view is what I always bring to the table, whether it's in a business, whether it's like coming up with strategies to reach people, whether it's, what the future looks like and how our business and how like, business elements can fit into it creatively, seeing things in a script that nobody else sees, making associations that nobody else makes. I think I bring a unique point of view that is wholly mine to the table. So that's what I think my greatest gift is a as a artist entrepreneur. I want to come up with a new word, but yes, whatever.
My therapist, once said to me that a blessing and a curse of mine, but I do think it's a blessing both as an artist and as an entrepreneur, is my ability to thrive in chaos. It was a big part of how I grew up, and it put me in a position where am able to withstand a lot. Both again as an artist in this space, like I'm I'm very facile, and as an entrepreneur, I can take the hits and continue to pivot as necessary.
Mm, love it. Love it. Guys, man, thank you so much for that perspective. And of course, it goes without saying how much I value setting goals, how much I value the artist as an entrepreneur. And in fact, folks, Joshua, when I was a client at Artist Strategy, is one that helped me to launch the Actor's Instrument. Um, so I'm extremely appreciative. Yeah, at one point, that was just a goal on my 5-year plan was to launch this podcast. Now I'm over 50 episodes in. We've got Red Letter Entertainment as co-producers. We had a really strong year in 2024 and are only looking to build upon that in 2025. And it came from one day sitting down and tangibly setting a goal and thinking about if I pursue the direction of having this podcast, what could that do for me along the way? So, guys, it works. It works. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about artist strategy and potentially working with them, Mike and Joshua have been generous enough to offer free consultations and an additional 25% off of all their services for listeners of the Actors Instrument using code Actors Instrument, no punctuation. We'll drop a link and other important information in the episode description below. Mike and Joshua, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, dude. Always a pleasure.
If you enjoyed today's conversation with the consultants at Artist Strategy, then you'll love a recent interview I did with Victoria Kress of the Osbrink Talent Agency. So be sure to check that out. If you're on YouTube, we're going to put a link right here on the screen. That's it for today. Big thanks to all of our listeners for tapping into this episode of The Actor's Instrument. Give us a follow. If you're on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button. It helps out a ton. The Actor's Instrument is a presentation of Red Letter Entertainment. Executive producers Adam Jellicourse, Serena Esposito, and yours truly. We'll be back next Tuesday. Till next time, y'all. Peace.